Welcome to MiWeek. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Christy McDonald. We have a full show for you tonight, starting off with a closer look at regional transportation. Specifically, how much is it going to cost and how much we are willing to spend on it. We will take a look at what voters may be faced with coming up. Plus, you'll hear from the new Detroit Public Schools Superintendent, Alicia Merriweather, and a conversation with journalist David Marinis, the author of Once in a Great City, A Detroit Story. That is all coming up for you tonight. But we are starting with regional transportation in Southeast Michigan. The RTA is working on a ballot proposal for November. We expect to hear details on what the plan is later this spring. But that really raises a lot of questions as to how much money should be raised by this millage, for what, and is the timeline just too tight to get the public on board? So let's bring in our MiWeek contributors, Nolan Finley of the Detroit News, Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. Guys, it's good to see you. Talking a little regional transportation. So when we're talking about this possibly being on the ballot, Nolan, and getting some money here, is it getting a little late in the game to start getting some public support for what we don't even really know yet?
I mean, it's going to be on the ballot. I think the law requires it to be on the ballot. Whether or not you can have time to generate public support, I think this has always been a tough sell for one reason. People already pay a regional transit tax in this town, and now they're being asked to pay a second regional transit tax, and 90-some% of the people in the region don't use mass transit, don't use the bus system. So you're going to now be paying two taxes for a service you don't really use, and while it may benefit your community, certainly benefit your businesses and all of that, unless you can convince people they're going to use this system, I don't know how you generate support.
Yeah, but if they're adding a little bit onto the system, wouldn't that go to saying, well, now if we add a little bit more spokes to this, you will be able to use it?
You've got to convince people to get out of the cars, and that's always been a hard thing to do in this region. But the more important factor is you've got SMART out there that people have said, okay, it's not a system that I would use, and now you're going to have this RTA system. They should have combined these three systems and said we're going to have one very flexible, very nimble system that you're going to be able to use, that you're going to have confidence it's going to stop at the right place and take you here, just like in other cities. And we're a car community.
Well, compared to other cities, we don't spend nearly the same amount in terms of transportation.
We don't, and we don't coordinate it in any reasonable way. I mean, DDOT and SMART still have problems figuring out who does what and connecting things together.
Wasn't the point of the RTA to finally get some kind of entity that would bring things all together?
Long term, that's what will happen. I mean, I think the approach here is sort of reflective of how hard it's been to get anything done for 40 years, and that you can't go from 0 to 100 overnight. And so rather than combining all the systems and saying we're going to have one that does everything, the idea was to create this and get it started with a couple of small scale wins to build confidence that transit can work for more people. Is that going to sell to voters? I don't know. I think it's going to be a very tough sell.
How do you sell that to voters then?
I think you sell to voters the idea that we will get more rational transit out of this, but that it won't. The problem is it's not going to happen overnight, and this particular tax is not going to create the system that we all really need. And so
And the big issue too is you don't have enough people working downtown yet to create a demand for this. I mean, the people who work downtown are going to vote for this and are going to look forward to it because it's going to be a good system. Hopefully, I mean, it's going to get you, but that's a very small percentage of the workers in this region. I mean, in other places, the central city is the major employment center.
But part of the reason that downtown is not the major employment center is because for 60 years we've employed transit policy and other things, massive highway construction and all this other stuff that makes it easier to move people out. I mean, at some point we have to decide whether, and we continue to do that, by the way. I mean, we're going to widen I-75 through Oakland County. That's a competing interest to better transit. It just is. And so you got to at some point decide what's the priority. Is it public transit, or we just want everyone to drive cars?
Well, if it's going to be public transit in this region, it's more probably going to be buses. buses. I don't think we're going to launch some major subway project here when the Federal Highway Trust Fund is empty. So doing projects like widening 75 works very well, fits very well into a bus system, particularly a rapid bus system.
If you make it an
that
HOV,
leaves these communities and comes
if you make the
downtown.
lanes HOV, that's true.
There's no reason you can't.
Well, but there's all kinds of hurdles to that apparently. That's what was on the drawing board. We're not sure if that's going to be the case.
But once the lanes are built, you can do with them what you want.
Actually, you can't. I mean, you can't. There are some legislative hurdles to, I guess, to making them HOV.
I mean,
we don't have.
You've got to relieve traffic congestion, and the sanest mass transit, or the most logical mass transit in this area, are those rapid buses.
Probably.
Really quickly, before we leave this topic, in terms of the cap of how much that they're going to be asking for, there seems to be competing questions about how much they even want to ask for in this.
Yeah, well, they want to put a cap on it because there's a weird anomaly in the law that says if there's no cap, then it counts against local millages.
So what are they talking, half a mil?
2 mil. They would cap it at 2. I don't think they need quite that much.
They cap it at 2, or they would go after that from the beginning?
No, there would be a limit on that.
So what do they go
overall.
after at the start?
I don't think they need to. I think they need more like
I think we're
if
going
you're only
to
gonna
hear
get
more
this
details.
once, I think you've got to go after what you need.
And we're
Take
going
it all?
to hear more details in the next coming weeks.